been a while since I've done one of these. It isn't just me whining or whatever, especially. It may be a good sign. I think it's just a sign that I'm trying to avoid my groceries. So I've posted on Facebook a couple of times about this. Well, at least once, and I was about to again. The matter of talking points. You see, and sort of the ultimate at this is Mitch McConnell, right? But you see various politicians who will say something when asked another question, an in-depth question, will basically and sometimes verbatim repeat exactly the talking point that they intended to present to whatever questions they're given, basically, about a subject. I've decided that this is a form of lying. It really is. It's one thing if they release it as a press statement, or if they stand up at a podium and say that. If they choose to answer a question and repeat the same thing, ignoring what the question actually was asking, ignoring the intent of the question, they're doing something to attempt to mislead you. They are hiding what their true responses would be. Now, you never saw this back, if you look at when somebody like Dick Cavett would interview a politician or whatever. Back then you used to see thoughtful responses to questions, where it was obvious that the person had considered what they were going to say, but they understood and grasped the idea. A little later in the 80s, you started seeing people being a little too flip, a little too willing to just, say something off the edge off the top of their head. And that became okay, except when it didn't. Because the fact of the matter is, sometimes people will say things that give away the game, give away something that one portion of the population just says, oh no. Well, to me, the largest portion of the population should be saying, oh no, to when you're clearly being deceived. When someone refuses to answer the question and doesn't just state out loud, well, I don't want to answer that. Why don't you want to answer that? Because maybe 20% of my public won't like the answer that I give. These carefully crafted, essentially press release statements are really a lie. And there's no need to bring them to an interview. There's no need, the idea of an interview is to be able to elicit more than the mere statement, right? That's the concept behind an interview. And if somebody goes on to an interview show and all they can say is their little pat statement, they should never show up again. They're useless, right? It's not to say, it doesn't make sense to throw questions to Mitch McConnell, who is absolutely, the best at this. But, and I've got no problem with him answering with exactly what he says in a press gaggle or something like that. Because what he's doing is he's out there to make a statement, he makes that statement. That is not what you should expect when you're looking at an interview, at any level of the situation. But those politicians who go even a little bit off of it in a non-completely friendly interview situation get in trouble almost all the time now. You see people, part of it is, I think, that impulse control thing. The thing that started, that I noticed in the 80s, which was this kind of just answering questions, obviously without having really done your homework to understand the fundamentals behind what you're giving an answer to. But all the same, whether this is a defense against sloppiness, so sloppiness and making stupid statements is a sign of something, I do it all the time. I do it even when I'm talking like this, Because I believe, well, first of all, because I'm lazy, and that's a given, right? But I also believe that more can be gotten out of the discussion of the moment than can be gotten out of a carefully crafted and tuned statement about something. There's something about the journey, and the journey's lost when you have a crafted and tuned statement. But I'm not trying to persuade you that I'm a good candidate for anything, right? I'm not trying to persuade you that my views fit yours relatively well. If I'm trying to sell you something, there's a reason that telemarketers and various sales people have a script that they work from, right? It's so that they can get exactly to the thing that they want to say, the precise words that they need to say to move you to do something that you wouldn't otherwise do. Now, again, I argue that any kind of scripting is almost a lie. It's not the same level as it is with the interview situation. Because in the interview situation, there's a presupposition that the person being interviewed is there to answer questions, not just to keep repeating statements, right? Similarly, on a debate, if all you do is spew forth pre-rehearsed lines that are prepared, whatever, and tested demographically to make sure your focus groups all don't take offense at any of them. Well, then what you've done is you're no longer following the presupposition of a debate. The real presupposition of a debate is this idea of two people up there arguing points and counterpoints against each other. That doesn't mean you can't prepare, right? You can prepare. I know he's going to bring this up, and I also know he's going to fail to mention these facts. That's the work that goes into doing it well. That's fine. That's honest still. You've put effort in and prepared to be able to say certain things. And how much you polish it, whatever, is something different. What's not good is the baking in a fallacy type maneuver in there. The baked in deflection, whatever. That's all there. Those kind of things actually really kind of irritate me, although they're always the star moments, right? This is the thing that they pay a couple of people on your team to prepare for you is, hey, come up with this nice zinger that if they touch this, you can hit that, And some people are very good at it. Some people are not so good at the turning things around, and it just sounds like this whiny kind of whataboutism type thing if they do it wrong. But it's really no different. It's really no different. It's just how prepped you are, right? How much you're giving a canned response. If you're giving a canned response, there's a question of how much you actually believe it. I've been an actor. I can go up on stage and play any character. Once you kind of focus on the delivery and trying to capture this persona who's providing something, you're no longer presenting yourself. And when you're running for office, it's you that's being elected, not the character that you're presenting, presumably, right? It's why Bernie Sanders is fucking great, because he just goes up there and says what he's going to say. And I think that's the appeal of a Donald Trump as well. He goes up there and says what he's going to say. Unfortunately, what he's going to say, in both cases, they're going to turn off a large portion of people for different reasons. But so I don't want to hook into trying to convert between the two. But that's what makes them popular, right? Is that they go up there and they say things that presumably they understand what they mean to say. I'm not so sure in the case of the latter. But anyway, I think what you're seeing in the popularity of these types of politicians is that this extreme adherence to talking points, to the script, to never going off the rails is just disgusting us as a population. We know we're not getting the information. We can tell, and we recoil from it, right? We don't like to see that obvious, and even when it's not obvious, even when it's very skillfully done, there are politicians who are very, very good at delivering talking point things without it necessarily seeming so jarring. The way Mitch McConnell does it seems jarring, right? You ask him, he gives you the exact same answer again and again. And I've seen a number of people who kind of studied under him do the same thing. And then the Democrats started picking up the same, as you see Chuck Schumer doing it, picking up some of McConnell's mannerisms because they're useful. When he's giving a speech, says something and then kind of repeats part of that sentence again right away. Repeats it again right away. And it's really an annoying, feature when you're listening to it conversationally, but you understand what he's doing dialectically. He's sinking that deeper into your brain by saying it twice. And Joe Biden even picked it up, but he does that little, because I caught myself kind of doing it. And then he does that little whisper thing. I don't know how much I feel about those things, right? Those are more rhetorical flourishes, right? I don't feel like they're really lying. They're a polish that you wouldn't see in a normal conversation. But if they help sink people's minds on the key point, I don't think they're a bad choice. And to get into that kind of habit isn't a terrible thing. But again, I think that a large portion of the population is sick and fucking tired of people who can't sort of speak coherently about a subject. All they can do is get up there and repeat. No matter what you ask them, they tell you something that they're so focused on and that's been tested and everything, and that can do no harm. That's the key to it all. Can do no harm. You even see it so one of the places where it really, really got heavily used, and it may have been one of the earlier places, was after Bork failed in his nomination. Supreme Court justices nominees have just stopped saying anything, right? They won't comment on any hypotheticals. They won't comment on anything, that's not just sort of factual. And again, I would say that's a disqualification. You're not answering my fucking question, so no, But people are like, well, we know they'll vote for us. And this is both sides, man. This is both sides, so don't worry about it too much. It's just continuous. It's continuous. And the only thing that kind of, no, it's across the board at this point. I think when you're not being given a full answer, in a situation where you're being brought in for questioning, either as to your suitability for a position or as to your views on some circumstance or whatever, if all you can do is present the polished, prepped version, and you can't, it speaks of one of two things. Either you've memorized your line and you don't know shit about anything. That's one possibility. That, you've been prepped and you don't know anything because you're too fucking busy working the phone banks trying to get donations, and your staff is the ones who are like feeding you your lines, basically. Or, and I don't know which is worse, they're both equivalent in my view, or you've got this one focus-tested piece of misinformation, right? It may not be a lie, it may be factually true, it may represent your position, all the nuances are kind of baked in there and allowed to ferment one way or another, but no one gets the information that they actually need from it, And, you'll see similar kind of stuff when people are prepped to testify in a court. You know, say it this way. You know, only say this, etc. That's not the way to get the information that the public needs. And I'm going to stay away from the legal side of things because I don't understand fully what's involved there, but it's disturbing to me there. But it is absolutely ludicrous for anyone to vote for someone who isn't able to speak cogently about the subject they're being asked about, if they're supposed to know that subject, if you expect them to, and or isn't willing to engage in a real, discussion as opposed to presenting a statement. Immediately that puts you in a state that, like, I feel like you're below almost anything else. It's very, very hard for me to vote for someone if I see them engage in that kind of tactic. Then, I could be sitting there and saying, yeah, but I know that they agree with me in terms of policies, and the other guy doesn't. And then it becomes this huge, balancing act of their character versus, versus what their likely positions are. But just remember, if their character is weak, their positions may change from that same weakness. Not because they've seen something and understand better, not because, they've undergone some fundamental, better grasp of all the issues at play and have been convinced, but rather because it's expedient. And to me, that's the key issue within character is, as long as somebody's not proposing really, really, really horrible policies, from my point of view, character is going to trump policy. I would rather have somebody up there that I trust their own integrity. The problem, of course, is where their integrity is wedded to ideals that I just, can't possibly stand behind. And I understand that, I mean, from my point of view, there are certain things that the conservative side, it's funny because I have such a twisted positioning in terms of my belief in sort of the constitutional system and everything. I believe I'm very, very conservative, like ultra conservative. I've brought up before, I think that, I consider Marbury versus Madison the first case of judicial activism that went way too far, right? This placing itself above where it is. I very much believe in sort of that original, very originalist, not even originalist, very textualist reading of the Constitution. And that leads me to positions where I look at the legal status of a question, and I look at what I want as an outcome, and they're just in conflict. And I can live with that. I don't necessarily believe that the best things are absolutely enshrined in the Constitution, but there are ways to change that, and those ways aren't just to ignore the Constitution. So there I think I'm ultra conservative, like far more so than probably anyone who's on the court right now. Gorsuch sometimes shows signs of being up there, but not as much, I think. So then, if you look at so why did I get lost here? Oh, I don't know. And this is, of course, the problem with not having a talking point, is that, my mouth ran away and I don't know quite where I am anymore. Which, that is a character trait that would be important. If you're evaluating whether or not I'd be suitable for a certain kind of office, it might be of some importance. It might not be that big a deal because there'd be aides, et cetera, to bring me back to focus on point. It's definitely of importance when you're looking at, is this someone I want to listen to for game reviews? Because they're not going to hit all their points. They don't write down their list of topics that they want to cover at the very least. Come on, man, do a little something. But yeah, I think that the act of being of straight out presenting that kind of misinformation or misleading as to not being pinned down, etc. And if you don't want to answer a question, you could just straight up say, "I do not want to answer that question." Of course, that would be a red flag. Like, people would be like, "Oh, no, that's horrible. Why wouldn't he answer it?" But if you ignore the question, like DeSantis did with the, are you going to run, are you going to promise to stay for a full term? Or if you just restate your talking point that doesn't clarify the answer at all because it's the same words or essentially the same, I feel like you're cheating a little bit. And that the red flag should be brighter and worse. Like, assume the absolute worst whenever somebody gives you that kind of answer, right? That kind of misleading. Doesn't mean it's going to hold up, again, in a court of law. Like, if you're interrogating a prisoner, I think that's the right word for it. I'm not sure if that's useful. It sounds a little harsh in the U.S., but I think it is actually what they do. If you're interrogating a prisoner and or a suspect, and you get, I've been watching too many true crime videos and stuff, and you get, either them repeating the same answer that doesn't, repeating what they've said before, but it doesn't really answer the nuances of your new question, or just changing the topic or something like that. They're playing you. And you know that, right? You just know that. So you should bring that same kind of reaction. If your significant other, comes in and you ask, "Well, what did you do all night?" And they're like, "Oh, my car broke down and things turned ugly." You said, "Well, yeah, but you have AAA, and that should have been resolved within an hour, right? What did you do all night?" "Well, my car broke down, and things got..." You wouldn't accept that, right? You'd pry for more. You'd want more. However, we kind of don't seem to expect that out of people who, may not influence us as importantly as in that case. But, if somebody comes in late for work with the same kind of excuse or something, yeah, okay, whatever. But eventually it marks up against them, right? And eventually somebody repeating that same kind of misleading response, even if it is not technically a lie or whatever, I would view that as the worst possible. I would rather they just outright lied, to tell you the truth. Because then you could catch them in an outright lie. But this kind of thing, they're hedging so much. And it's baked in there to hedge. And it's baked in there exactly perfectly. And they can't stray from that specific hedge. All right. That's enough from me. I guess the thing I would say is when you're looking at people like this, hold that microscope to them carefully. And try to treat people on your own side of the issue with as much scrutiny as you do on people on the other. And then, you still have to make that reasoned decision, right? You still have to make that reasoned decision of, yeah, but I know the other guy, he's just going to ruin everything. Yeah, I absolutely understand that. I've looked into that. I get it, yeah. I don't want to go any further on that side. All right, up she goes.